Namaskar to everybody, and special thanks to Ram for arranging this through Indus University. I thought that this should be a very good opportunity in this Dharma Kal, this very terrible times, to keep our spirits up by thinking of Dharma and how Dharma can make us stronger, not just for Corona, but for life and perhaps many other issues that are coming. So, as you know, the famous saying, Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaha. So, we take care of ourselves and we also take care of Dharma so that Dharma can look after us. That's the very old saying. So, let me begin with a Mangalacharan. In praise of Shiva, Ganga Taranga Ramani Jata Kalapam, Gauri Nirantar Vibhushita Vama Bhagam, Narayana Priyamananga Jata Paharam, Varanasi Purapatim Bhaja Vishwanatham. So we think of the Lord of Varanasi. Varanasi is the place where there is great creation, learning, shastras, arts, everything, and where, as well as the funeral pyres, the Manikarnika Ghat. And in my experience, that's the most beautiful place in Varanasi, because that is where the bhasma of Shiva is available to everybody. Shiva is also the destroyer. I was seeing all these pictures, videos of Indian corona patients being burned all over India, and CNN and BBC and Al Jazeera showing those pictures again and again, gloating over it, almost gloating over. And they looked upon it as a horror. But then, if you look at what is the truth, then perhaps this is the most essential aspect of truth, which is death. Because unless you know what is death, unless you are aware of it, of course you can experience it only once in a lifetime. But unless you are aware of it, you cannot strive for immortality or amritatva or for dharma. Now, I am not going to give you any kind of a long exposition on what is dharma, because I want that today we should interact. We should ask questions. We should try to answer them, not just to seek an answer from me, because I can't give every kind of an answer. I'm not capable of it, but also to ask each other and give answers to each other and have a dialogue. So we have some very profoundly learned people like Kyunrad Elst here, and there will be several others soon joining. And so I hope we'll have a good Dharma Charcha, Dharma Samvad as to what is Dharma. Now, I'll be content today by just giving you a very simple definition. Dharayate iti dharma. That which sustains you is dharma. Now, it sustains you in every manner, at every time, and at every place. And at every stage of your life. and in every social corner. So it is not just a set of rules, it is not a set of commandments, it is not something which can be just called convention, something which we have been doing always. It is not something which may be called a obligation towards certain sections of society. It is much more than that. Dharma is essentially the ability to decide what I should do at this moment and how shall I execute it. If I always go to laws and to things which have been done in the past, then I may be able to follow Dharma or live up to Dharma. I may not. Now, in India, it is taken for granted, and many people will tell this to you repeatedly, that the rules of conduct are not eternal. Rules of conduct change with time and place. Rules of conduct are broadly categorized or were categorized or enumerated in what may be called the smritis, because smriti is your memory, and the memory of not only what you have achieved and the right way to achieve it, but the memory of how you have perceived truth at different stages of history, as is evidenced by the different texts. So smriti, which is a later version of the sutras like Apastam and Haritika, etc., the smritis always follow what is called the truth. The smritis are not something which can sustain themselves by their own rules or their own commandments, because they have to follow Shruti. You will simply ask the question, well, how do the Smritis follow Shruti, that is the Vedic mantras or the Vedic, or in the Vedic Samhita, when do's and don'ts are not clearly mentioned? You see, the Rig Veda, and then of course the verses of the Rig Veda is largely the other two Vedas also. When it is sung, it becomes Sam, and when it is used in Yajna, then it becomes Yajush. But essentially, it is the text is in the Rig, the Richa. The Richas don't have something like rules of conduct, that this is best, this is what you should do, because Richas are primarily, they are stotras in praise of devatas, in praise of male and female devatas. But they have a concept of what is called Rita. Rit is not very clearly defined, because Rit is something which is to be experienced. It is to be experienced through the agency of performing the yajna, and later on performing different other kinds of sadhanas or certain kinds of endeavors, meditation, yoga, etc., etc. So the realization is the truth, and the truth as realization is enshrined in this way in the Shruti. And it is in this sense that all commandments, all rules of conduct, all sense of right and wrong, all what may be called, what the Greeks called ethiki, the ethical, all that has to follow the experience of the truth. So, this is not something which came about very late, but this was very early. and the whole thing was enshrined in literature also, as in the famous saying of Kalidas, where he says that the wife of Dilip went after the sacred cow, looked after her just as Smriti follows Shruti. Shruterivartham smritiranvagachat. She went after the cow just as Smriti goes after truth. Now, to put it in very plain language, it is the realization of truth which always gives you the sense of what to do and what not to do. That is the rule of conduct. And if that rule of conduct is followed with that consciousness and if with that awareness that this is what I have to do, not that, then I am following Rita, I am following the truth, and then Smriti is also helpful to me. How shall I explain this? Let me take an example, something which all of us know. Rama was told by Dasharatha to go to the forest for 14 years, give up the kingdom for 14 years. In fact, give up the kingdom to Bharat forever and then go to forest for 14 years. Rama did. What was the result of that? The result was that he went into the forest. He created a whole revolution in modern terms. He established Dharma from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka. He conquered Sri Lanka and he gave the kingdom of Lanka to a Dharmic brother out of the Rakshasa brothers. He comes back. Bharat never acceded to the throne. So he came and occupied his rightful throne, and the whole story ends in what is Rama Rajya. Okay, you know this all. Now take another example of obedience of the father. And I'm going to take an example from an equally powerful text, an equally important text from the Indian literature, that is Mahabharata. Shantanu tells Bhishma, who was not called Bhishma, but Devavrat, his son, that look, I just can't control myself. I'm almost close to death because I have fallen in love with this young fisher woman and I must have her. So Devavrat says, fine, Dad. It's all done. It's all taken care of. And he goes and he says, marry your daughter to my father. He tells the father of Satyavati, or Matsya Gandha as she was called at that time. And the father says, only if you abdicate, only if you ensure that you will not have a child, a progeny who will threaten the throne. So he does this Bhishma, this terrible, awesome vow that he shall never marry. What is the result? Is he able to protect the line of kings that follow? He does not reproduce, he does not marry, he doesn't come close to a woman. He is a brahmachari. He does this very great vow, which is called a Bhishma vow. And because of his great sacrifice and control, he is given the blessing of Ichha Mrityu, that is, he shall die as and when he pleases. In other words, he has conquered the material world, the world of five guna elements. But he was not able to protect anybody who sat on the throne of Hastinapur. So, Vichitravirya is not able to have a child, all kinds of terrible things happen, and finally Mahabharata. Bhishma is not able to prevent Mahabharata. So, obedience of father in one case brings Ramarajya or Dharma, and in another case it brings what? It brings Kali Yuga. From Dwapar you out of the frying pan, you go into the fire. You go down the ages. Both is obedience of father. But in the first case, the obedience is for the sake of Dharma. Because Dasharath was not bound by anything else except his word. You see, he had to give that word. He had given that word. And according to the ancient custom, which is not just the Hindu custom, but it was actually, you find it almost followed in Greece and many other cultures at that time, that if your word was given, if you were bound by it, then you had to follow it. So Rama was bound by that. But Bhishma could have told his father that, my dear father, why do you have to do this in old age? Not that you would end up causing me harm, but why do you have to do this? What is it that you want? You just want carnal satisfaction. And because he acceded to that request or this command, not a command, but as the Mahabharata only makes it, the pain of his father, which he could not see. So granted, he was a sensitive son, but he ended up doing Adharma. And it is not only he who abstained and could not reproduce. Nobody in Mahabharata from that point onwards could reproduce naturally. If you read the Sambhava Parva, that is the chapter on creation, on births, as Sambhava Parva should be translated as, the chapter on birth, there is only unnatural birth now. Vichitravirya cannot reproduce, his sperm is not capable of fertilizing. And so there is niyog. The result of the niyog is neither good. Pandavas, most of them are sick, except, Pandu was sick. Similarly, the Pandavas have an abnormal life. And on the other side, in the Kuru, the 100 children, they are born in a very unnatural, perverse manner. The result of all this is war, Adharma. So Dharma is making the right decision at the right time for the preservation of what is truth and what is justifiable. I'll take another example. There is a story which occurs in all kinds of texts, Indian texts, that a sannyasi and his young sannyasi disciple were traveling, and when they went by the side of a river, they saw a young, beautiful woman drowning. So the guru, he jumped into the water, he pulled the young maiden out, and in order to pull the woman out of the water, he had to embrace her, hug her, bring her onto the bank. So he did this, he left her, and the two continued. But for several days, the disciple was very disturbed. So the guru said, "What's wrong with you?" He was not able to ask his question. So the guru said, "Okay, I know what's wrong with you. As a sannyasi, I hugged that woman in order to save her life, left her, but you are still hugging her. she's still in your mind. So it's your problem. Now, a sannyasi is not supposed to touch a woman. But I had to do it because it was my dharma. I had to save her life. So rules are broken. Rules can be broken, should be broken in order to execute your dharma. Now, this is the Indian wisdom. I mean, one can go on taking all kinds of examples, all aspects of dharma as conduct, as subservience, as following the rules laid down by your fathers, as duties, many things which can be described as dharma and are commonly called dharma. But the crux of it is simply this. Am I able to choose the right path when there is a dharma sankat, or when there is, I forget there is any proper English word for it. So when I come to that point, which path should I choose? And if I go on to the right path, then that path sustains me and leads me to happiness. So the crux of dharma is that it's not a set of following certain rules. And rules have to be broken at times when they become a source of oppression themselves. There's not one, but dozens and dozens of Hindu stories which illustrate that. Rama had to kill Vali by hiding behind a series of plantain trees. You see, he could not face him. He could not have faced him and killed him because he had this boon, he had this power that whosoever would come face to face, he would lose half his strength. So Rama would have lost half his strength and he could not have killed Bali. So Rama had to break the rule of the heroes at that time. And you find not one, but many illustrations. Now, this is very different from the understanding of some very great people in India like Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi had a very, very literal understanding, something like following a commandment, because if a commandment is laid out, then it is fine. And that is why quite a few people, particularly our friends in the West, Indologists in particular, have a very hard time in trying to understand this. And they think that there is nothing called Hindu morality, but there is only Hindu convenience. So that's why Wendy Doniger says that a Brahmin is a shrewd person who is actually immoral, and he is somebody who is a fixer. He will tell you a way out. Now, that is belittling the greatest strength of Hindu ethical thought. That rules become oppressive in themselves when they do not apply, when they are not in the right time and place. And so, you have to see dharma in this sense. And that is why dharma in its practical application changes with time. The rules are not immortal. So, I'll invite questions now.
Sir, this is Sridhar from Bangalore.
Yeah.
My question is, in the essence of dharma or adharma, always the good over evil happens every time. So my question is, the pandemic is repeating every century. Does it have any relation to a dharma winning over Adharma or something? This is repeating every century, I am told.
Well, it is repeating every minute. It is repeating every second of your existence. I mean, I enter my kitchen and I see 50 cockroaches. You know, the cockroaches are sitting in my kitchen table. What do I do? Should I let them stay there? Should I allow them to propagate and fill my whole kitchen? Or should I kill them? Now, that is the choice I have to make. I've given you a very plebeian common example. So I have to kill those cockroaches. That is violence. Okay, I have to do this violence. Now, violence is adharma. I am forbidden to do violence as a Hindu. Okay, ahimsa paramo dharma. I am told that. But ahimsa paramo dharma hinsa tathaivacha. But there is a violence which I have to do in order to save myself or even in order to preserve myself. So I make the choice. Now, I can make a wrong choice also. I can use violence where it is not needed. I can be over violent. I take an example, again from Ramayana. You know, the night when Ram and Sita were cozily sleeping in their hut, and the big fight was announced with the two great Rakshasas who had come after Shurupnakha had been disfigured. This is very strangely, old age is catching, and I forget the name of these two great demons or these Rakshasas whom Rama had to fight in the morning. So Sita tells him, my husband, my Swami, you are a great warrior. Tomorrow you are going into battle, you will win. But I'll humbly request you to use minimum violence. Don't fire a single dart which is not required. Just do minimum violence, because that is the mark of a great king. So here, that was dharma. You had to kill, but not to overkill. Now, what you are talking about is encapsulation of this whole thing in terms of certain camps. Like the camp of Duryodhana versus Yudhishthira, Ravana versus Rama, or, I can't take contemporary examples because then they will always be controversial. So you can comfortably take only historical or rather mythical examples only. Because if I say that Hitler versus Churchill, then many people in Germany would say that, no, it's Churchill who is responsible for everything. Now, there is a fight, but which is the fight for dharma and which is the fight against dharma? That is a decision that we have to decide. That is a decision when we have to make, when we support two fighting camps. I am with you, I am not with you. Now, I have to make that decision, and there can be no rules for it, because not that it is arbitrary, not that it is to be decided on the basis of selfishness, but who is dharmic in your perception? And that's how you have to do it. So the Mahabharata gives many examples about this, this problem as to Dharma Sankat, what to choose, where to choose. So Krishna goes with the Pandavas, but his own brother, Balaram, he goes with Duryodhana. And yet he does not, he gives moral support, but he does not fight as a warrior. So it is time only that is able to demonstrate, if one can use that word, as to who was right and who was on the side of Dharma. Not that that itself is beyond controversy, because many people say that the winners write the history and then they distort all the facts.
Namaskaram, sir. सर रामायण में मतलब जब हनुमान जी लंका को जाते हैं तो लंका बहुत ब्यूटीफुल डिस्क्रिप्शन दिया गया है लंका का। हाँ कि लंका नगरी कैसी है और वहां पे कैसे कैसे लोग थे। बट उसके बाद हनुमान जी ने लंका को जलाया था। हाँ। तो मुझे ये समझ में नहीं आया ये किस एंगल, मतलब ये क्या ये धार्मिक कार्य था, क्या ये धर्म था? एक छोटा सा।
हाँ देखिए, I'll speak in Hindi because you have asked me a question in Hindi and we decided with Ram that we'll use both the languages, but we'll speak, I'll give an answer in the language of the questioner or the question. अब देखिए क्या है कि सुंदर होना, उससे आप सत्य के, धर्म के सच्चे आचरण पर चलते हैं, ये कुछ इंश्योर नहीं होता। आप बड़े सुंदर हो सकते हैं, रावण भी सुंदर था, he was very good looking, he was a handsome person, Ravan. Just because you are beautiful, handsome, magnanimous, doing great things, giving people a Nobel award, that does not mean that you are dharmic, that you are doing the right things. You may be doing most pernicious things. You may be beautiful. तो लंका को उन्होंने जलाया. He burnt Lanka because that was what he had to do in order to give a warning. The criteria was not that it's a beautiful, prosperous city. Should I cause violence or not? अब तो वहां युद्ध था, युद्ध तो लड़ना ही है आपको. I mean, it's like this that, a soldier goes to the Pakistan border and a Pakistani soldier reads beautiful poetry of Ghalib and, so should the Indian soldier not shoot the Pakistani? I mean, it's a war. The rules of war are different. You don't bring in those criteria which at that moment are extraneous. तब फिर कुछ और चीज उसमें काम नहीं आती. पांडित्य काम नहीं आता, विद्वत्ता काम नहीं आती. बड़े बड़े अधार्मिक लोग जो हैं उनमें बहुत विद्वत्ता थी. I mean, all those Christian fathers who were inciting their followers to break the Greek temples, they were very learned theologians. Saint Augustine, later on Saint Jerome. But then, do you think they did the right thing? They used their learning for destruction. So I hope I have answered your question.
मेरा प्रश्न आपके पुराने जो विचार संगोष्ठी तृतीय प्रकृति के ऊपर हुई है, जो टर्मिनोलॉजी आप यूज करते हैं, उसके धार्मिक सेंस को लेकर एक वेगनेस चाहती है, क्योंकि तृतीय प्रकृति को समझने के लिए ना हमारे पास में उस तरीके का एक नॉलेज है वांग्मय को लेकर कि हम किस वांग्मय को आधार रखकर उसके बारे में जाने, और जो धार्मिक एक पक्ष है जिनको हम ट्रेड्स बोलते हैं आजकल ट्विटर में, वो ट्रेड्स वाला जो पक्ष है वह उस चीज को समझ नहीं पाता, लेकिन एक इंडियन साइड, इंडिक साइड जिसको आज प्रमोशन दिया जा रहा है, वो इन राइट्स को लेकर एक बैकफुट पर है अदर फ्रेंड्स के सापेक्ष में. तो इस चीज को काउंटर करने के लिए जो लर्निंग है उस वांग्मय की, उसको कैसे जनरेट किया जा सकता है धार्मिक मॉड्यूल में?
देखिए, धार्मिक मॉड्यूल का अर्थ है बहुत सिंपल कि आप तृतीया प्रकृति को क्या मानते हैं, क्या आप उन्हें मनुष्य मानते हैं या नहीं मानते हैं? This is a question. Let me just put it into English for those who don't follow Hindi. It's a question regarding what in old language can be called the homosexuals or the homoerotic people. And he says that what is the Indian position on it? Because there is a huge diversity of views in the present day world. That's what he means. Some people think it's awful. Some people think that it is natural and good and it should be accepted and there should be no discrimination. So what is the dharmic position or the traditional Indian position? And of course, the question comes to me because I have been for about 15 years trying to point out that the Indian tradition considers the third gender. Tritiya Prakriti is a technical term used in Kamasastra, Vatsyayans. And Prakriti, Tritiya Prakriti, those who by nature are of third gender. So in other words, they are not perverse or they are not unnatural or they are not sinful. So this is the Indian position. आप जितना भारतीय साहित्य पढ़ेंगे आपको उसमें पूरे के पूरे एग्जाम्पल मिल जाएंगे, और सबसे बड़ी बात ये भी मिलेगी आपको कि थर्ड जेंडर होने से, तीसरी प्रकृति होने से, हाँ, कुछ समाज में चीजें उस जमाने में उनको नहीं मिलती थी या आज भी नहीं मिल पाएंगी, लेकिन ज्ञान, नॉलेज, पढ़ाई लिखाई, ये सब पहले भी सुलभ था लोगों को. Although it is true that in ancient India the bulk of homoerotics were in the profession of sex work, what is called sex work today. They were in that profession. They stayed around prostitute houses or courtesan houses, and that was considered to be the place. And they worked in the entertainment industry. Some people mischievously point that out to me, that it is true even today, that the homoerotics are most comfortable in the entertainment industry. And they cite several examples from Bollywood. Now, whatever may be the truth, the Indian position is very clear, not just in one text, but in several texts. This is a problem which was brought into India largely by Christianity, partly by Islam, because Islam has a ambiguous or almost schizophrenic attitude towards it. Theologically, Islam condemns it. Quran and Hadith, they condemn it. But in practice, it was never considered as something wrong. So it was practiced. And the Greeks thought it was absolutely natural. There were several other cultures which took it very naturally. So I think we have now in the world arrived at a broad consensus. The problem is only how to assign them social roles. So some people would say that the head of your national army cannot be a homoerotic person. Some would say, why not? I mean, we are now in that kind of a controversy or in that kind of a debate. But I think by and large, the ancient position, not just the ancient Hindu position, but the position of the pre-Christian world is now accepted.
Good evening.
How are you?
Doing good, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sir, just one curiosity question here.
Yeah.
From the relationship perspective, how we can look at our 6 systems of Indian philosophy and the relationship of those with the term dharma, and more importantly, which is much basic and influencing. Is it a concept of dharma is influencing on the 6 philosophies, or the other way around? What is the position which you think?
Oh, you mean in Indian philosophy? 6
systems of philosophy, as a Sankhya, Vaisheshika, and
the Shat Darshanas.
Shat Darshana. Yeah, Darshana. Yeah.
Yeah, the Shat Darshana. See, the what may be called, although that is more of a classification followed by departments of universities following the Western pattern, that in philosophy there is something called ethics. And so in ethics, you focus on what would be the right conduct. But in the Indian system, dharma is something which, as I said, is seen in a very broad perspective. It is not seen only in terms of what is good and bad. Because this whole idea of good and bad is not just seen as two binaries by the Christians. Even the Greeks, the Greek idea of ton agathon, that is, what is essentially the good, although that was a very wide term. What is good for me? And good would mean knowledge is the first thing, or Gyan is the first thing, which is the best and essential thing. So, knowledge in the Indian system is that which gives you the ability to decide what is to be done at every stage of your life. So when you are a young person, let us say 10-year-old, then most of the things you decide by example, by imitation. You learn by imitation and you follow the rules. But when you are much older, you decide as to what is really sustaining you or not sustaining you. Dharma is essentially that which sustains you. So, in the Indian system, there is something called Chaur Dharma. That is the dharma of the thief, the dharma of the assassin, the dharma of the courtesan. Now, these are terms which would shock some people. What do you mean, dharma of the courtesan? There is a very interesting story. Let me tell you that story. It comes in Dash Kumar Charit of Dandi. It's about 8th, 9th century, around that time, the text. One day, there was this great Muni who was sitting in front of his cave and just finished eating something after finishing his meditation. A real forlorn woman comes and falls at his feet. And she says that, look, please save me, for God's sake. So he says, what's happened? Is somebody trying to kill you? He said, no, I have been kicked out of the whole city and they all want to kill me now. If I go back, they'll just stone me to death or whatever. So please let me hang around. I'll not enter your cave. I'll just look after your welfare, get you fruit, etc. So the Muni said, okay, fine, don't enter my cave, but stay out. So then she started doing things, bringing firewood, etc. And after a while, Muni said, okay, you can enter the front of the cave. And she did that. Then, of course, she made living extremely comfortable for the Muni. And the Muni accepted all the service and the affection that she gave him. And eventually, she said, why don't you become my husband? Now, in real ancient times, munis were allowed to marry. So he said, okay, fine. And then he married her, became her husband. So one day she says, look, I think a lot of my mother these days. And my mother was very old when I left the city. Now I can go back to the city, see my mother, and I'm your wife, and nobody would dare say anything to me. So the Muni said, yes, yes, of course. So Muni takes him to the city. Now, when they come close to the city, the woman says that, my dear husband, I am coming home. They should think of you and of me as somebody of means. So I need a horse. So why don't you get me a horse? So Muni said, I can't get you a horse. I'll become a horse. You sit on my back. And so Muni becomes a horse on his fore, and they enter the city. As soon as they enter the city, this woman gets off the back of the Muni, and she kicks him in the ass. The Muni falls to the ground, and there are so many women who surround this woman, and all of them are laughing. The Muni is puzzled. Then the woman says, look, you know, I am a courtesan. I had laid a bet. I had laid a bet with the highest, most expert courtesan of the city that I am more skillful than you in winning over the men. And I can even win over the great Muni who is sitting there on the mountain top. I can seduce him. I have such great power of eroticism in my will. And I executed it. Thank you very much. You have done the job. You have been a useful idiot. Bye-bye. Now, she performed what is called the Vaishya Dharma, the Dharma of the courtesan. The Dharma of the courtesan is to do well in profession, to make money, to seduce men, to take their money and have a very good Vaishya Graha or a prostitute or a courtesan house. So that which sustains you, that great skill, is your Dharma. You see, the meaning of Dharma is that. Now, that does not mean that you should practice lowly things, that you should become a thief or a murderer, etc. But in case life has put you in a situation where you have to steal, then steal well. Be a good thief. Don't be a heartless thief. Be a kind thief. Be a Robin Hood. That is your Dharma. I'm sorry, I may shock many people, but the Indian textual tradition stands behind me. I'm talking from text, I'm giving you examples from text. I'm not concocting things. I'm giving you all the time, giving you examples.
Sir, in Natya Shastra, there are several references to Dharma. Yeah. And the majority of it is in connection with Artha and Kama. But there is also a reference where the concept of Dharma is in an anthropomorphic way. He becomes the God's Dharma, and he is the husband of Saraswati.
Mm-hmm.
So, so my question is, what type of God is that God that is her husband, the husband of Saraswati in Natya Shastra? And if that is one question, and the other one is if this is the Dharma of the nut?
Okay, let me give you an answer to your first question. It's not only in the Natya Shastra, Dharma becomes incarnate in many places, like Yudhishthira is supposed to be an incarnation of Dharma. And at many times, Dharma comes in body in the Mahabharata and in other stories. Now, that should not be surprising because in the Hindu system, everything which is in the form of energy or force or spirit can also be incarnated. You see, we are talking in terms of a worldview in which energies can become flesh. And so Dharma Raj can become a god. That is when he becomes incarnate. And that does not apply to Dharma only, that applies to almost any kind of energy. Like Surya becomes a human being and he begets a child in Kunti, in Mahabharata, Karna. So, I mean, this is a very common, if you may call it, an Indo-European trope, that gods come down and they conceive progeny in human women, you see. So Zeus begetting a child in Leda, that kind of, there are innumerable examples. So Dharma becomes incarnate, but he is no less Dharma just because he is incarnate, right? After all, that was the essential ideas which the Christians borrowed from the Greek. That God sent his only one begotten Son, and he was incarnate. So he was not any less of divinity. By becoming incarnate, Jesus does not become a lesser force. He remains the Son of God, right? So this was an idea borrowed from the Greeks by the Christians. But essentially it is, well, if you like to call it Vedic idea or call it an Indo-European idea, depending upon, what is your perception of ancient India, ancient world. So this is the truth about Dharma. Your next question, Joanna.
So my next question was, is the Dharma from Natya different from the Dharma from the six systems of philosophy?
No. You see, I just gave you a definition of Dharma. That which sustains you is Dharma. So what is going to sustain a Nata? Nata is a technical term, let me tell everybody, for the actor, the stage performer. Now, what is going to sustain a stage performer? His or her ability to perform. To perform Angik, Vachik, Satvik, Abhinay. To do all those bodily movements, to sing songs, to do the acting, to represent a character on stage. That is the Dharma of the actor. His Dharma is not to study the 6 schools of philosophy. Right? That is the Dharma of an Acharya who is going to teach the 6 systems of philosophy. So what sustains a Nata is something different from what sustains an Upadhyaya or a professor. Right? I mean, you are an actor yourself, an actress yourself, but the man who teaches you at the university, he doesn't climb onto the stage and start acting because he can't do it. So that's not his Dharma. It is your Dharma to do a performance. Yes, good evening. Good evening, Kyonrad. How are you?
Okay, I was just looking to unmute myself. Well, You mentioned about Indologists.
Yeah.
And as being one of that terrible breed myself, I will not correct you because what you said, like about Wendy Doniger, is true. But you see, there is a bit of a difference between, let's say, classical Indology before the 1960s, let's say, and all the wishy-washy stuff ever since. Now, in the old days, the famous German philosopher Hegel wrote a book about the Bhagavad Gita, and which was only just translated. It was totally new, and so he saw that yes, there was a real ethics in there, a system of ethics. However, he didn't like it because he was the philosopher of modernity. You see, he had lived through the change through the French Revolution from the ancient feudal system to the modern system. And so what he saw in India was this differentiation, ashrama dharma, varna dharma. So every group had its own rules.
Right.
And so he thought that that fell short of a modern, a rational ethics for every man.
Yes.
Right. Do you agree? Or do you want to defend this differentiation?
No. I would certainly defend that differentiation because dharma is different for every person because it is defined in terms of your location, your station. Now that is the difference in dharma. And I think that's exactly where there is a lot of difficulty that the Western system faces. For instance, there is a famous essay by this man who used to teach in Chicago, this Indian, South Indian. Is there an Indian way of thinking? An Indian way of morality? And he raises this question that, look, Westerners, they want certain very simple, defined rules of conduct. And they cannot accept the fact that conduct can also vary according to your station of life. And yet, there are certain principles on which you will not make any wavering. I mean, for instance, let's take a very simple example. The dharma of a wife. And I'm talking of very simple, old Hindu world. It means a lot of obedience to the husband and following his wishes and like being like Kasturba to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Okay, just take another, a very simple example. But the Indian system would not say that if your husband goes and commits a crime, then you are going to defend him. That you will go to the court and say, no, he was not there. You will not stand an alibi for him because that is adharmic. So there are certain things that you are obliged to do as a wife because that is your wife dharma or your stri dharma. But then in order to give evidence before the court, you have to treat your husband not as your husband, but as somebody in the social system who has committed a crime. So a wife, dharmanukula, there are 6 qualities of a wife that Sanskrit literature mentions, Karyeshu mantri, that is, she is the one who is going to give you advice when you have to do something. Karaneshu dasi, when you two have decided that this is to be executed, then she doesn't bicker, she just follows. Karaneshu dasi, shayaneshu bhojyeshu mata, she feeds you like a mother. And shayaneshu rambha, and she is like an apsara in bed, very skillful in Kama Shastra. Dharmanukula, she follows dharma. It doesn't say patyanukula. The text doesn't say that she follows blindly the husband. She follows the dharma, dharmanukula. Kramaya dharitri, she is a forgiving person. But then, of course, she is not going to forgive murder. She'll forgive certain things which can be So this whole business of doing things according to your station, according to your place, according to what is required of you at that moment, that is dharma. And that has to be practiced in order to be saved of any kind of a reversal of existence. Because if you don't do it, if you don't follow dharma, then adharma or lack of dharma is going to damn you. Now that can happen at very subtle levels also. Like there is the example of this Muni, Jada Bharata, who was in the final stages of meditation. And he saw that a tiger was chasing the young one of a deer. So he felt a lot of affection and he saved that deer. So he became attached to that deer. And in next life, he was born as a deer. So he had to spend a whole lifetime, one birth as a deer. Now that was not dharma, because at that time he was a practicing yogi. A practicing yogi does not have to interfere in the lives of others or get attached. So he transgressed his own dharma, his own vow, and therefore he fell. Now, I know that this is not so simple. And largely in the Abrahamic tradition, where the rules of conduct are spoken by, let us say, Allah or by Yahweh or by Patros, it's a little difficult to understand that the set list of commandments or set list of ethics will not apply everywhere in every situation. I have attempted to, show the difference. I don't know which is right or which is wrong. You still feel that there is something you would like to say? Please tell us. It will be nice to hear from you. No, you have to unmute.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, Hegel should, of course, have understood that even in his own family life, not everyone had the same duty. The father does not have the same duty as the son. The wife does not have the same duty as the husband. So it's really fairly simple to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you put it very beautifully. You put it very simply, but that's exactly what it is. Duty is different, and yet it is dharma. It may be contradictory. I mean, there is this classic example of Karna. Karna, Kunti goes up and says, "You are my elder son, now give up fighting against the Pandavas, and you will inherit the kingdom." Because they will all accept your primogeniture, you as the first son, and they'll all follow you, my 5 children. But Karna says, sorry, it's too late. You should have said this 30 years ago. Now I am committed to Duryodhana. So Sakha Dharma. Now my duty is Sakha, because I have taken the vow of helping him. I cannot go back on him. You see? Now you have innumerable examples of this, let us say in Greek mythology, where you give your word to somebody and then you even give your life for that. You know, there is a play by Euripides called The Supplicants. So it's because you have given your word, because you are committed, you cannot go out of it. And therefore, you, in a worldly sense, are a loser. But in the higher sense, you are the hero. You are the winner. And that's why Karna is a greater Dani or a giver than Arjuna. He has a spiritual status which is higher than Arjuna. Although Arjuna was the winner and Karna was the loser. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Pal. Pal, please unmute yourself.
Pranam sir, can you hear me?
Pranam.
I am a PhD student at IIT Kharagpur. In my PhD, I am trying to evolve a student's code, which is based on our ancient Brahmacharya Ashrama Dharma. For modern students, especially all IIT students. In my research, I am facing a problem that in ancient Brahmacharya Ashrama Dharma, there are many practices. Three of them are Surya-Upasana, worship of the sun. Second one, Agni-Upasana, worship of the sacred fire. And third one, Bhiksha-vritti, seeking for alms. These three were the essential practices for the student. Now my doubt or my question is, how will I modify these three practices for the modern students? This is a
very beautiful, very relevant question.
Could you please give suggestion?
You have to take the spirit of the ancient conduct. So if it is Bhiksha Dharma, then it should be part of the duty of the student of a university to collect some funds for the university or to do some kind of a service which is free service for the university. Then, you know, the Agnihotra or the fire worshipping around the yajna. So which means that a person has to devote some time in either a higher pursuit or, you know, deeper study or worship or meditation or puja. So you take this, you know, you take this purpose and the spirit of the ancient practice. The practice would have to be different because we are living in a different milieu. We are living in a world of a different technology. We are living in a different environment. But it will be as effective as it was in ancient times, provided we are able to find the right modern practice for it. Now, for this, of course, you'll have to change your values because the modern education system doesn't think of it that way. The modern capitalism says, take a bank loan and pay a huge fee to your alma mater, to your university. So you give money to the university right now, take a loan, bank loan, and keep giving back to the bank. So there is a fundamental difference, a civilizational choice which is different from ancient times. In ancient times, the student was supposed to serve in the ashram, contribute through service, through seva. And then later on, throughout his life, he was supposed to donate to his alma mater. Throughout his life. And it was done. Those who did not do it, they were castigated. They were thought of very poorly. But that system was not it was not a capitalist system that you take a bank loan and then you keep giving money. You see, that was the modern system is purely commercial. Whereas the ancient system was entirely human because it was a guru shishya, a relationship. So the values were very different. And I personally see no hope for modern universities. They are crumbling. I mean, the downfall that I see in American universities in 20 years, last 20 years, is very painful. You know, I used to be a student at an American university and a Canadian university. I have degrees. So I don't like what's happening now because they are purely commercial now. And they will not last for very long. So I hope I have given you some good suggestions.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have got few suggestions. But could you please elaborate the first one, Surya-Upasana?
Yes, Surya-Upasana is spiritual exercise. It's a yogic exercise. So you may not want to do Surya-Upasana today. If there are too many communists around and if they make fun of yoga, you can go to gym. But you can also do some mantra. Tat savitur varenyam bhargo devasya dhimai dhiyo yo naha prachodayat. You can do that kind of an activity.
So I'm living in Luxembourg, and my question is, Brahmins are describing that Dharmasastra is describing the way to live from morning to evening, all day is some ritualistic ceremonies are there to be performed and all. But I live in Western world, I work in the academics. So what is the way out? Like how in the modern day life, a Grihastha can modify the Apastamba Sutra and other things to live the life?
Look, my answer would be along the same lines. The earlier questioner, he asked about the Brahmacharya ashram, right? And you have asked about the Grihastha ashram. Now, the crux of the Grihastha ashram is that you generate wealth. Lok sangraha, as it is called, the technical term, that you collect wealth, whatever is your profession, your just and fair way, you collect wealth with artha shuddhi. You know, it should not be an impure or immoral way. And then as a grihastha, you will do things which are prescribed for you. Now, there were things which were to be done earlier according to your varna. If you were a Brahmin, you would do this, you were a Kshatriya, Vaishya, etc. Now, today, maybe you can have a mixture of all those, but the crux of all those activities was that you have to give back. You have to give back to the people you are living with, the society. Dan. You know, Dan in India was considered to be the most essential requirement to be requirement from the human beings. The devatas were supposed to restrain themselves. The Rakshasas or Danavas were supposed to be kind because they are unkind by nature. But because human beings are greedy, so they were supposed to give. So if you do dan, now in ancient times, according to ancient economies and requirements, they had certain prescriptions of dan for certain people. I think you can find out what is most appropriate in your society today to give to dan. So it could be just anything, you know, providing a scholarship to a young worthy student or whatever. And dan is an important thing. Then there are certain other prescriptions which are made. You see, in the older system, the Grihastha ashram was the highest of the ashram. Sannyas was not the highest of the ashram. Manusmriti and Mahabharat, they both called Grihastha as the highest ashram. Why? Because it sustains the other three. It looks after the sannyasi, it looks after the vanaprastha, and it looks after the student. Now, I think ashramas are not specific to culture. Ashramas are biological. Everywhere in the world, in early life, people have to study. They are students. Then till middle life or late middle life, they are bread earners or earners. And then there are people who should think about, that was the ancient Indian system, that you think about something higher, that you do something in vanaprastha which is spiritual or which is giving to the people. You don't kind of have a retirement life where you hop from one beautiful island to another, or you go on those cruisers for months together. Now, this modern idea of consumerism was not part of the ancient world, at least not the Hindu world. So I think you can recapture in your action the ancient idea. But it would all come from dan, giving. I hope I've given you a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, the next question is from Dr. Ankur Kakkar.
Namaste, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ankur.
Great to see you again, sir. It's like, it's like Raat ko pravachan. I have a question, actually. This is regarding a verse in the Katha Upanishad. So in the Katha Upanishad, there is a verse that says that there is always a choice for individuals to choose between something which is called Shreyas and something which is called Preyas. So something which is good and something which is pleasurable. So it is said that the wise people choose Shreyas over Preyas. So do you think this is a yardstick for Dharma? Like, can we measure Dharma by this yardstick? And if that is so, then according to this yardstick, how would you define the act of Bhishma that you were mentioning in the Mahabharata at the beginning of the talk?
Yeah. You see, Shreyas and Preyas are the choices or the roads. That in every action, you don't look to your convenience. You don't look to your comfort. You don't prioritize what is convenient, comfortable, easy. But that which in the long run brings fruit, that is Shreyas. The Bhagavad Gita also says the same thing. But the instrument of following Shreyas would be according to your station in life, your location, where you are. Your dharma would be either the dharma of the son or a husband or a professional person or a king or whatever. Now, action would be defined according to where you have to act. So it's not that you become a sannyasi. It's not that you pursue the ultimate right from the beginning or right from the middle of your life. So you have to follow the journey of life and act accordingly and pursue Shreyas accordingly. You'd be surprised to say that, to hear that even the Kama Sutra says this. Kama Sutra is not just those sexual postures and gymnastics for sexual pleasure. It's a very profound psychological text. It says that out of Dharma, Artha and Kam, out of these three, whenever you do an act of Dharma, then be careful to see that it does not harm Artha and Kama. Whenever you do Kama, be careful to see that you do not harm Artha and Dharma. So, out of one, when you choose the road, do not harm your future or your present in other two. So, the other two should be protected. So, Shreyas and Preyas is an everyday choice. I should not act according to my convenience, according to my simple choice, that what I likes and dislikes. But what exactly I should do, this is something I'll have to decide there and then. And that's an individual choice. It's not a universal prescription.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So now next question is from Anurag ji. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. Namaste. Actually, my question is that does the spirituality leads to dharma, or dharma leads to spirituality, or what the actually the linkage between them, or sometime I become confused. So please.
This term spirituality is a totally meaningless word. In the Indian scheme of thought, what is spirituality? I jokingly tell my disciples, in India, spirituality means drinking a lot of spirit and dying because you have taken the wrong kind of alcohol. Now, joke apart, what is spirit? We define it as Atma. So, Atma Utsarga, going up, taking the Atma up, realizing what is Atma, not essentially in terms of Vedanta only, but in whatever system, whatever philosophic model you follow or you have generated for yourself, whatever sadhana, you arrive at a greater and greater realization of things. So it is Gyana, it is knowledge, it is understanding which leads to a better or a higher life. And that has been loosely translated as spiritual. You see, this is a very mischievous word, spirituality. When the Theosophists came to India, and when there was this total terrible Christian bias against Hindu rituals, then they said, give up rituals. Follow the truth. The truth lies in spirituality. And spirituality is following Brahma, Upanishad. So we had all this Brahmo Samaj and all these things, all those philosophical systems which followed spirituality. And spirituality was very good, and following rituals, doing religious things, that was bad. You see, that was exactly the problem of Vivekananda when he went to Ramakrishna, because he thought that idol worship, Murti Puja, was terrible. And Ramakrishna was nothing but an agent of the devil. Now, this is primarily Christian thought which entered India, and Indian intellectuals were so badly intimidated, terribly intimidated. Arya Samaj was intimidated, Brahmo Samaj, Dev Samaj. And this intimidation has not disappeared even to this day, because we still have this notion that no, worshipping Nirguna Brahma is best. So look at Kabir, how great a poet he is. And Tulsidas, well, it's okay. But the spiritual, the Kabir is more spiritual. Now, all this is a product of 100 and 200 years of Christian intimidation. It has nothing to do with the classical system of India. These terms, because in the Indian system, what is fundamentally important is a sadhana, is an activity. Manasa vacha karmana. You do it with your heart, with your mana. You do it with your words, and you do it with your action. So action has to be there, whether that action is yajna, whether that is meditation, or whether that is going to the temple or serving the poor or whatever. So that chitta shuddhi has to come through action. And that action is always a ritual action. It's only that action which elevates you. That is the one which really makes you spiritual. So you should understand that ritual is the most essential element of Indian philosophy, Indian art, and Indian way of feeling and thinking. Ritual is the crux of it. Because ritual is not an empty set of rules which are prescribed to you and you keep on doing it mindlessly. No, ritual is something which is to be done with awareness. Just as you perform or you act with great awareness, and then you are able to influence your audience. Similarly, when you worship with awareness, with your mind, body, and with your words, when you do that ritual, then there is a transformation and knowledge inside. Well, that's how I would want you to think, and stop using the word spirituality. Use the word Gyana, knowledge. If you want to use English, use knowledge.
Right.
Yes. Next.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Hello, sir. So, according to you, what is the difference between Dharma and Sanatana Dharma?
Dharma and
Sanatana Dharma.
Oh, Sanatana Dharma.
Sanatana Dharma. Yes, sir.
Sanatana Dharma. The word Sanatan. Your question is about what is Sanatan, isn't it? Isn't that your question? What is Sanatan?
So, what is the difference between Dharma and Sanatana Dharma?
Your voice is cracking. Can anybody else?
According to you, sir.
Her question is whether there is any difference between Dharma and Sanatana Dharma, or are they same?
Yeah. All right. I get you. Thank you. All right. Now, Dharma I have defined. Then what is Sanatana Dharma? Now, there are dozens of Anuštubhas, that dozens of shlokas in Indian text, which end up with the line, Dharmo eshah sanatana. So, for instance, take Manusmriti, Satyam bruyat, Priyam bruyat, na bruyat, Satyam apriyam, Priyam api nanritam bruyat, Dharmo eshah sanatana. Now, this means is speak the truth, Satyam bruyat, Priyam bruyat, and speak the truth nicely, softly, and sweetly. Na bruyat satyam apriyam, and don't speak a truth which hurts somebody. I mean, it may not be judicious to speak the truth at that time if you are hurting somebody. Then the third is priyam api nanritam bruyat, but also never speak something that flatters others. Don't speak a white lie. Don't tell people false things. Priyamapi nanratam bruyat dharmo esha sanatan. This is the eternal dharma. This is your conduct forever. Now, there are many kinds of words, many kinds of injunctions in this manner. That this is the crux of it, regarding violence, regarding obedience, regarding your choice in life. There are dozens of texts like this, which talk about what should be the conduct. And they say that this has been considered to be the eternal truth. So Sanatan Dharma is that Dharma which is to be followed all the time and always. As I said, there is a dharma which is very temporary. Like I am a teacher. So it is my job, my dharma to teach. But I may choose a different profession. Not that now after being a teacher for 50 years, I'll do something else or capable of. But suppose I become a businessman, then my dharma would be to have, to earn money through a different means. It would not be then pursuit of learning. Now that dharma is something temporary. It is chosen by me at a given time. But that I should not speak falsehoods. I should not speak white lies. I should not speak truth in such a manner that it hurts people. And at the same time, I should not refrain from speaking truth. This is the Sanatan or the eternal Dharma. So Dharma which is universal, that is Sanatan. And Dharma which is located and for a particular time and a person, that is the Dharma of that person there and then.
Namaste, Pranam Bharatji, and thank you very much for this enlightening talk. What I have observed during these conversations and the journey going on among Hindus nowadays is that, there is emphasis on revival of being a practicing Hindu. Because the emphasis is that if you believe in Hinduism, that makes you are as good as a crypto Hindu. Or like Hinduism, if it is a living civilization, then you have to, it has to be practiced.
Right.
So, and they say that Hinduism is, or Sanatan Dharma is less about orthodoxy or belief in a particular philosophy.
Yeah.
That it is more about orthopraxy or the praxis of it.
Yeah.
So in current times, what should be the nature of this praxis? Should it be just, praxis should be understood as ritual, like you answered in previous question, that only a yajna or some rituals or puja, or praxis we should understand as action. So to become practicing Hindus, what should be the nature of the practice in current times?
All right. A very difficult question. But first of all, I welcome this trend or this feeling that we should be practicing Hindu. And not just Hindus who believe in Hinduism and who pay lip service to it, or who categorize themselves for the sake of electoral role or something like that. Now, as I said, your practice of Hinduism would depend upon what you need to do at that stage of life, at that time, at that location. You see, for instance, we have Corona today. So if you want to be a practicing Hindu, you have to help people who are suffering. I mean, this is not the time to retire into some kind of a beautiful place and do some big yajna for 6 months. Because the requirement is to face the calamity. But at another time, you may want to retire for 6 months and look within or study something. Now you have to decide when you can do it and what are the social conditions or what are the conditions within your family. But the crux of it is that no matter what you do it selflessly. Because that selflessness, that atmotsarga, or that giving, is a yajna. It is a sacrifice. Sacrifice of the self. Because yajna is sacrifice of the self. It is giving yourself. Now, whether you do it as a ritual, whether you do it as social service, whether you do it as activity of another kind, that would depend upon where you are, who you are. But Hinduism provides that great choice and great diversity of choice. Yes.
Okay, sir. There's a follow-up here. To be more specific this time, Shankaracharya in his commentary on Gita, he starts with what you talked about is we can say it is Gyana Karma Samuchaya. So he starts his commentary that उसका पूरा तात्पर्य जो है वो ज्ञान में है, और even in the end on the 66th shloka of 18th chapter he says that he brings up again this topic again, whether the purport of the Gita is Gyana Karma Samuchaya, and then he says that ज्ञान और कर्म का तो विरोध है, तो उसमें ज्ञान कर्म के समुच्चय में भी तात्पर्य नहीं है. So that is this practice or karma is totally उसका तात्पर्य नहीं है, ऐसा उनकी opinion है. So now this revival of this trend we see from the followers of the 4 Pithas of the Shankar Pithas as well, that they say that bring in achar, bring in practice in your life. So that is also I believe good thing. So what is your opinion? Because we have this contrasting opinion here.
Right. What I have to say is that dharma varies according to the need of the hour. Shankara wrote in a time when maybe meditation, going within, or sannyasa, or aparigraha was very useful, could be done very comfortably, and was perhaps not socially disruptive. But remember, another great interpreter of Gita in our times, Lokmanya Tilak. What does he say? Nishkam karma. Now he makes nishkam karma a yajna or a sadhana. And that karma has to be done as social service which could be fighting for the independence of India in his time, you know, when he wrote that whole thing, or service of the poor. And that is to be done for self-elevation. So karma there becomes more important and leads to the same result. It leads to the same result. Obviously, by doing that kind of service or karma, you will not enter Nirbhi Samadhi. Okay. You will do that only if you are doing yoga. But then, if the need of the hour is to do social service or to fight for the independence of the country, then that is more essential. So that karma is more essential. Now, today you have to decide what is most required. You look around and see, what am I supposed to do? What is most relevant today? And where do I have to put my energies? And what kind of karma I have to do? I think we have entered a phase in India where we have to practice a huge variety and a diversity of karmas in order to fend for ourselves. We are now in a fresh phase of independence struggle. We have to fight back several invasions. Hindus have to fight back. I don't mince my words on that.
So, Bharatji, my first question is, how Dharmasastras are updated and revised? Because we know for the long tradition, we have long tradition of, major revision of Dharmasastra. Do you think this is the time now in 21st century where we need a major revision or updation of Dharmasastra? Because a lot of the time we have this question, how to customize it as per today's needs, circumstances and all that. And who is going to do that?
Yeah, you see, writing or rewriting the Dharmasastras or the Smritis was part of a whole system and a whole social order, which meant that in ancient times, it was not the king or the ruling class which wrote the Smritis. You see, it was a set of intellectuals who recorded them. And they also did not prescribe. It's a big mistake to think that they prescribed. They only made observations and said, this is better than the other, please do it this way. And then they also said that there is a whole diversity of ground reality, lokachar, which people are doing in different ways. So respect that also. Now, that kind of an order where fresh smritis can be produced is very difficult. Some people are trying to write new smritis in Sanskrit also. If they are able to do it, wonderful. But I think we will have to write, if not in the format of a smriti, we will have to write fresh books which restate our classical values as to how they are to be practiced in modern times. And here again, we have to seek a confrontation with some very, very specific notions of equality, liberty, fraternity, and various kinds of social segmentations that are accepted in Europe and America. And we cannot follow that pattern. I made a very small, humble attempt when I wrote this book, India, A Cultural Decline or Revival. And in that I have given 6 models, 6 sections of Indian society. I've taken a shlok from Mahabharata and where I said that the individual, the village, the family, the village, the nation, and the earth, and finally the Atma. These are the 6 categories according to which new rules of conduct be written. So I think we will have to proceed along those lines.
All right. Thank you, sir. My next question is related to Dharma, dilemma of Dharma. Yeah. Why there is so much about Dharma? Because examples that you have given in your introductory remarks is that even great souls had difficulty in understanding subtleness of Dharma.
Exactly.
So if they had such difficulties, what about common people like us in understanding, following, and understanding the nuances of Dharma?
Yes. Now this question has been dealt with in many times, and the usual answer is that examine things to the best of your ability. Use whatever education you have and use your discursive ability. Tarka vitarka. Not that you go within and search your conscience and then you come up with an answer that this is what my conscience says, this some kind of a Quakerism which Mahatma Gandhi practiced. So you decide that way. But in order to arrive at a proper conclusion, consult somebody whom you think is more capable than you. So seek guidance. That's all that we can do. And that's what we do in very mundane things also, We consult a fellow professional in order to take care of a problem in our professional life. Similarly, in our inner life as well. Or when we have to make great decisions. I hope I have convinced you of something.
Yes. Definitely, sir. Now, my next question is, as you also mentioned, as we all know that modern education is completely teaching what is alienated to our own civilizational ethos. So how to bring all this dharmic perspective into mainstream academia? Any simple plan or any step that you would like to recommend to today's policymaker who are running education system?
No, I cannot be so presumptuous as to make suggestions to policymakers. And right now, we have an emergency in the country, so nobody is going to listen. Anyway, you see, this is not just a matter of changing textbooks or changing curriculum, or it's not just limited to that. That, of course, has to be done, should be done. But it is essentially the task of studying the texts of India, from the oldest text, the Rig Veda, down to modern times, where our great thinkers like Aurobindo and others have written. And we have to see the classical texts as to what are the values enshrined in them. We have to go back to them. We have to go to them through Sanskrit language, through classical arts, through music, dance, poetry, theater, drama. Because this is in India Pancham Ved, the 5th Veda. This is not just some kind of a bragging that arts are 5th Veda in India. They are a serious activity in India. They are considered to be vital. Now, the more we practice them, the more we go deeper into them, the doors will open and we would be able to see fresh things. Remember, the European Renaissance took place by study of Greek and Roman texts. We have our own texts. Of course, we should study those texts also. I am not prescribing some kind of parochialism, or some kind of a hyper-nationalism. But I am very clear that before you go to Vasudha Kutumba, first think of Bharat Kutumba. That is, before you think of the world family, just think of India family. I mean in terms of texts and other things also. And there is no contradiction between the two. Because if we are taking care of home, then we'll be able to help ourselves and others also. But you can't begin by claiming that you are going to be Vishwaguru. It's such a ridiculous slogan which I hear all the time in the present scenario. You know, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and Vishwaguru. I frankly think we have to just re-examine this whole thing.
So this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as you are mentioning, this we have not borrowed from Western countries. This is something of our origin, of our confusion. Where do you think this confusion lies? What is the source and origin of this?
You know, the shloka, the verse, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it was an ideal, but then people gave a warning also. You all know the meaning of that verse, that for those who are large-hearted, the whole world is a family. This is the meaning of it. But then this was said in certain context where it was supposed to be a satire also. You know, it was supposed to be a satire also. That before thinking of others and helping others, just become capable of helping others. Otherwise, others will make a fool of you and use you as a useful idiot. And I can see that happening a lot now. In contemporary politics, that's happening. Many Indian leaders are being used as useful idiots by foreigners. So this is the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam reality. We have a world family, but let's take care of our family. This is not narrow nationalism. This is just being realistic, standing on the ground.
So the secularism is often translated as, Dharma Nirapekshata. So how do you explain that in a land where Dharma is the key-pin of the entire civilization? So how your views on that, please?
Yeah, a grandson of Mahatma Gandhi used to discuss this issue of secularism all the time. I think it was Rajmohan Gandhi. He was a member at IIC and so was I. And he would say, Pandit Ji, what is the Indian word for secularism? And he was terribly confused about secularism. Now, my answer was very simple. India is not a secular state. India is a Dharmic state. India does not believe that this world is only material world. We are not materialists. So, because secular in English, as derived from Latin, means something which is of this world only and which has no whiff or no shred or light of the divine. So we can't believe in a divineless society. And in practice, secularism only means that there should be a cordial relationship between Hindus and Muslims. I'm putting it very bluntly. Because whole secularism is based upon the idea of relationship between minority and majority. Now, I believe that if we have to live in 21st century, we have to give up this classification of minority and majority, which was a classification made by the colonial masters and which is still being practiced in a very inappropriate way in Europe and America. You have to look upon your dharmic, your philosophic, your intellectual duty towards everybody. It has nothing to do with a classification based on color or religion or on some kind of a way of life in terms of clothing, etc. So a state that looks for the welfare for everybody and treats everybody as equal and does not give concessions and evolves a system of values which are accepted by everybody and which is concerned with the welfare of everybody is a dharmic state. A dharmic state is not a Hindu state. Just because of the word dharma, it does not mean that you are going to impose ancient Hindu values on everybody within India. So it means that we have to live in the 21st century where many kinds of conducts as to what is, and many notions of good and bad, etc., need to be revised. And one has to see these things in terms of rationality. What is really good for the people? I mean, if you discuss, for instance, something like inheritance, then are you being equal in your dispensing with the inheritance between boys and girls, between sons and daughters? Are you treating them equally or not? I mean, this is the new notion which is accepted. Earlier, you accepted the notion that the eldest son of the family would inherit everything. But now you have a different, and nobody should come around and say that my religion forbids it. So if women have to live freely, then I don't think there is any room for hijab or parda or any such thing. And if some people come around and insist that this is mentioned in the Holy Quran and I must follow it, then I don't think we'll come to any solution. So you cannot import ideas from the past, insist that you are going to live with them alone. You have to work out things, of course, with consensus, which is not an easy thing and which very often results in a lot of conflict and violence. But you have to work that way out. And that is the only road. If you really think that there is going to be equality, where everybody is going to be treated equally, then nobody can say that I am special. I am special to God, I am special to religion, I am special to prophet, I am special to my ancient values. Nobody can say that. I think that is exactly the problem. That people want to inherit something and then enforce it on others. They don't want to work out a consensus.